Let's move on to network printing, and that means that our computer is connected to the network, and then our printer is also connected to the network. So when we send a print, it's actually going through the network, sending the job to the print. It's extremely common in business. There's actually, most of the concepts that we've already gone over are going to apply to this, but there's a couple things that I want you guys to see. So let's pull up our devices and printers again. So I've removed our local Lexmark, actually unplugged it from the USB, and I hard-coded a static IP on it, just like we talked about in the last video. And I'll go ahead and add printers again. The printer that I want wasn't listed. I'll choose this add printer using TCP/IP or hostname, and then I will add my static IP that I gave it, 140.100, and I'll just click next. So my computer actually added the printer really quickly. It automatically populated this name, net100, because on the printer itself, that's what I actually named it. Oh, I'll click next. You can rename the printer here whatever you want. I'll hit next. You can print a test page if you'd like. For the user or for yourself, just to make sure that it works, hit finish. And now we can see that I have net100 here. The icon will eventually catch up. It'll actually show the Lexmark printer just like it did when I had it locally. It just hasn't caught up yet. But if I right click and I go to properties, let's say that the user has a lot of printers and I want to name it something specific like accounting, I can just change that here, and then I can hit OK and it'll change it. But what I really want you to see is this ports option here, and you can see that it added as this WSD. So what a WSD port is doing is it's automatically finding the network device, and this is kind of a default. You can turn this off in your registry because this will cause issues. I've had it time after time after time where someone says all of a sudden my printer is just not printing. So this is one of the first things that I check when they say it's not printing and it's lit up like this, but they're hitting print and it's still not printing. When I see this WSD here, I know that this is causing the issue. I honestly don't know why. I turned it off in the registry. We haven't yet made a group policy to turn it off completely because it's not that big of a deal, but it definitely is an annoyance. So all I'll do here, you can see that I don't have any IPs to choose from. So I can just add this port here. So I'll just do a standard TCP IP port next, and then I'll just put my port in. And I can add that, hit finish, and then hit close. And then now if I expand this, I now have this 10.249.140.100. So rule of thumb, when I add a printer, I usually just check it really quickly and make sure that it's on the IP. Fortunately, that doesn't mean that it won't just jump back over to this WSD after an update or whatever happens. That's why sometimes I turn it off in the registry if it's starting to cause problems. But if I hit apply and OK, my printer will actually reinstall into the IP address. So I have two, one will go away. Normally, I just will set this as a default, and then I'll just move on with my day because they'll be printing again. I obviously always right click, go to properties, and I send a test print. That way the user knows that it is working. Be careful when you're sending test prints to accounting. Once in a while, accounting offices will load checks into tray 1. So if you send a test print to that printer, you're going to print the test print onto one of their checks, and then they have to void that check. So if it's accounting, I know that this is a lot, but if it's accounting, just try to remember to ask, hey, what's in tray 1? I'm going to send a test print just to make sure that it works. If you forget, then you forget, but just try to keep that in mind. I think because we covered so many concepts before in the local printers that this is going to give you a good cemented base to be able to understand how printers are working. But one thing that I do want to tell you about network printers, if the printer has the capability of being on Wi-Fi or being hardline, know that it cannot be both. Because very often there will be a network printer that all of a sudden is grayed out and there's really no reason for it. Sometimes I think it's 50-50 where the printer will get an update and it will automatically turn on the Wi-Fi. So a printer cannot be on Wi-Fi and hardline at the same time. It has to be one or the other. So what will happen is the Wi-Fi will get enabled and it will take over the hardline. Because in this case, and all the businesses I've ever worked for, we try to hardline all of our printers. So if I have a printer hardlined and I put an IP in manually into the screen and I jump over to the Wi-Fi, the printer's going to have a new IP address because when it connects to that Wi-Fi, it's going to pull a DHCP address. Well, my printer right here, I hard-coded this IP address into it. So if it grabs a new IP address from the Wi-Fi, this printer is no longer going to be connected with this IP address. So just keep that in mind when all of a sudden you have network printers and you're kind of chasing your tail. Could be that either the printer got an update or someone thought that they were tech savvy and they turned on the Wi-Fi trying to fix it or trying to make it better because they're tech savvy. So be careful of that. Make sure that the Wi-Fi is off when you go on site and look at it. Unfortunately, you're going to have to go on site. You're more than likely not going to be able to walk the user through that, but just keep that in mind. If I end up getting this box here and I've added the printer by the IP address and it spins and spins and spins, and then I end up getting this message here, there's something wrong with the computer talking to the printer. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a command prompt and I'm going to ping my printer. And if it doesn't come back, then we know that we have the wrong information. So we have the wrong IP address. We need to ask the user, hey, can you confirm it? Or if you can walk over to the printer and just make sure that that's the actual IP on the printer. If you can't ping it and it comes back, more than likely you just mistyped it. So just X out of here and then we'll just re-add it. More than likely you were just going too fast. But yeah, so just go ahead and try it again. If that still doesn't work, or if you can't ping that printer and you confirm that it's actually the right IP address, we're gonna start troubleshooting the network and figuring out where we're losing the connection from the computer to the printer. Just a word of advice, if you don't have access to the network, don't go right to the NetOps team and ask them to start troubleshooting it. They have enough to do. The first thing that I would do is I would ask the user user, can anyone else print to this printer? Hopefully someone else has it added and they will say, yeah, they haven't had a problem. Then we just know that it's some problem with the computer talking to the printer. Everyone can't print to it. Then we know we need to either troubleshoot the network or reach out to the NetOps team and see where the disconnect is. And it could be a loose cable. So if other people can't print to the printer, I'd make sure that the printer is powered up. I would make sure that the cable is actually connected from the printer to the wall. And honestly, I'd probably dispatch and confirm all that and change out the cable before I contacted my NetOps team. If you get on site, or if you're already on site and you change out the cables, you trace it all the way back, you make sure that you have good connection, you confirm all those things using the videos that we did before, then we would contact the NetOps team and say, hey, is there a route issue? One of the biggest things in your career will be not pushing your work on other people, because one of the things that drives everyone crazy, infrastructure, networking, even software, web development, is when you're not doing your job, you're just saying, it must be you guys. So it's a common thing between IT, so make sure you're doing all your work first, and make sure you're covering everything. Make sure you're putting all of your notes into your ticket or all of your notes into the email before you're escalating everything. If you want to stand out in your job, never create work for other people. You want to be able to fix the problem yourself. You want people to be able to rely on you for accurate information. That's how you move up in companies, so just keep that in mind. So with that being said, real quick, print servers and software. We have to cover shared printers really quickly. In a large company, this is kind of like a no-no, but we do see it even in the company that I work for. So the concept is that one user has a local USB printer and they're connected to their printer, and another user says, I need to print to that printer, but it's not a network printer, or it's not able to be a network printer. So what we'll do is we'll share the printer from computer to computer. The reason that we don't do this, and it's a big no-no in the enterprise community, is if someone shuts down their computer, this person will lose connectivity to the printer. So you can see how this can create a problem. So we try not to do this. Every now and then it does happen. So let me show you this real quick. So I have my Lexmark here. I need to go to properties, and then I'll go to sharing. I'll click share, and then I'll name this printer. So we named it Net100, and I'll hit apply and OK. Now people can discover that printer through my computer. If my computer's off, they cannot. So I'll do add printer. Printer wasn't listed. I'll do select shared printer. I'll do my 2 backslashes, and then I will actually use my IP address or your computer name. It should work on your computer name as well. So right now it's not doing it, but I would say 99% of the time when I put in the IP address, it starts pre-populating down here of the actual printer name. So it'll say this backslash and then net100. If not, you can always do browse. And this is actually my computer, so I'm targeting my own computer, so that's why it's not. But if I do a backslash and I hit browse, I should see that net100 pop up in a box. And if not, I might just try the computer name. Sometimes I just try both if it's not working. I don't really like to bang my head against the wall on this stuff. It'll usually just work, but I wanted to give you guys that. In large companies, we have a print server. And what the print server does is it holds all of the information for all of the printers. So the IP address, the driver, there's actually a lot more to it than just that, but we'll keep it simple because really we're just going to be adding printers as technicians. So what happens is we send the print, it actually goes to the server does the job and contacts the printer and spits out the print. The server can be a big rack mounted server or a desktop server that's in the server room, or it can be a little tiny box that is connecting to the back of the computer. So those parallel and those serial port, we can put adapters on those so that we can print through the network if it doesn't have a network card. But not a ton to it. Each print server is kind of doing the same job. The things that we want to know is, so you can add these printers the same way that we did with our network printer. So you can go through the control panel and go to devices and printers, add printer, put in the IP address. The only difference is that when it reaches out to the printer, it's actually going through the print server, and the driver is actually loaded on the print server. So instead of your computer reaching out to the printer and then choosing a driver that's loaded onto your computer from the Windows update, the driver is actually preloaded onto the server, so it's actually going to do that install. And there's another trick too. I've only worked for one company that did this, and it was a long time ago, but I remember being able to add a printer by just doing this run box, and I would hit enter, it would reach out, and it would actually automatically add the printer. It would pull that driver from the print server, which is nice because you can go onto the print server and you can add those drivers, and really there's not a huge difference between adding a network printer and adding a network printer from a print driver. It's more on the system side, and we'll get to that stuff. I do have some print servers that I want to spin up, but just know that print servers are a thing, especially in really big companies. So next I want to move to third-party printing or third-party print servers and just give you a kind of a 1-2 on that. This is pretty common here, so I want to give you guys a couple quick tips on that. So I want to talk about third-party companies or third-party print servers. So what happens is we have a need for a service. A company says, yes, we have this service, and they come in, they put in their own print server and their own software onto our computers. When I actually connect to their software, so I just open up the software on my computer, and whether it's shipping and receiving or inventory, whatever it is, and I start working in it, When I print from that software, it bypasses my computer and it goes directly from the software to their server, and then their server sends out the print. So remember we talked about how the print goes from our computer to the spooler and then to the printer? That doesn't happen with third-party software if it has a print server of their own. We don't have any access to it. So I just open up the software, I type in whatever I need. Maybe I'm creating a shipping label or I'm updating inventory and I hit print. It's going to bypass my spooler, my computer. It doesn't even know my computer exists. It just goes right to the server, and the server says print to this place. So if I want to change what printer that it's going to, I don't do that locally on my computer. I call up the company and say, hey, I'd like my purchase orders to go to another printer, and then they program it on the print server because we don't have any access to be able to change that. So as you can imagine, the first thing that comes up is people call and they say, hey, I can't print purchase orders. So my first question, knowing that I have that third-party software, is can you print anything else? Go ahead and print an email, print an Excel, print something out of Word or a web page. And if they can print that, then I've isolated the issue to the third-party software. If you have third-party software, your company should have a support agreement, and you should be able to call them and say, hey, I can't print purchase orders from this person's computer. Can you check it out? Now, you can do a lot of troubleshooting on your own. You can say, can anyone else print purchase orders? And if they can, then we know that it's more of a problem with their computer talking to their software, rather than if everyone can't print, then it's probably the print server that's having an issue. Maybe it's off, maybe it somehow had an update, or it's stuck in a loop somewhere. Before we get out of here, I want to leave you guys with this. When you're troubleshooting, anything that you're troubleshooting, isolating is the most important part. So let me give you some examples for your printing. If you get a printer ticket, one of the first things that you want to ask is, when did the printer stop printing? Because they might put in a ticket and say, my printer won't print. But when you ask, when did it stop printing? They might say, oh, it was just added. So that's a whole different category of issue. Maybe it never worked. Maybe they never had the correct IP address, rather than it working and stop working. If it's a network printer, can anyone else print to this printer? Because that tells us, is it an issue on the printer, or is it an issue on their computer specifically, or even the software that they're using? Sometimes I'll see Adobe just lock up a printer. So sometimes I'll say, can you print anything other than Adobe, or other than that third party like we had just talked about? A good follow-up to that is, can you print to any other printers? Do you have any other printers installed? Because that's going to tell us, is it the printer or is it your computer again? And those couple questions will allow you to isolate it to the program or the computer itself. I really appreciate you guys that watched the video all the way to the end. I'm really trying to build something right now. I'm just spending hours creating content and editing. So thank you for that. Please like the video and add a comment if you guys have any questions, and let's get ready for episode 11.